You walk into a room full of strangers. You don't know anyone. And yet, within minutes, one person feels different. Not because they're louder, not because they're more attractive, but because something about them feels familiar. Safe. Like you've met before, even though you haven't. That feeling has a name. And it's older than language. It goes back to a time when the wrong kind of stranger could end your life, and the right kind of stranger could save it. Psychologist Robert Zajonc ran a series of experiments in 1968 that would quietly reshape how scientists understand human attraction. He showed participants a series of photographs, random faces, no context, no names. Some faces appeared once, some appeared 20 times. Then he asked people which faces they liked. The results were striking. The more often a face appeared, the more people liked it. Not because it was more beautiful, not because it was more interesting, simply because it was more familiar. He called it the mere exposure effect, and it is running inside your brain right now. Your ancestors lived in a world where a face you recognized was a face that hadn't killed you yet. That was meaningful. That was data. A familiar face meant this being was around yesterday, and yesterday you survived. Familiarity became a proxy for safety, and safety became the foundation for trust. But here's where it gets strange. Your brain doesn't just track faces you've literally seen before, it tracks patterns, shapes, rhythms, the way someone tilts their head when they're thinking, the pace at which they speak, the particular way they laugh before the laugh actually arrives. Your brain is constantly scanning for matches, not just to memory, but to the people who wired you in the first place. Psychologist Arthur Aron spent decades studying why people fall into deep connections so rapidly with certain strangers. His research pointed to something he called self-expansion. When you meet someone who reflects parts of yourself back at you, your values, your humor, your way of seeing, your brain doesn't just register comfort, it registers growth. You feel more like yourself, only more. The stranger becomes a kind of mirror, and what you see in that mirror is a version of you that feels possible. This is why similarity is so much more powerful than we think. You've probably heard that opposites attract. They don't. Not really, not for long. Study after study, including landmark work from John Bowlby in the 1960s and replicated across cultures, shows that similarity is one of the strongest predictors of attraction and lasting connection. Shared values, shared humor, shared ways of moving through the world. The more your brain finds in common, the more it reaches toward that person. And this isn't just conscious recognition, it's happening below the threshold of your awareness. Your mirror neurons are firing, your posture is shifting. If the other person leans in slightly, you lean in. If they slow their speech, your speech slows. This unconscious mimicry is called the chameleon effect, a term coined by psychologists Tanya Chartrand and John Bargh in the late 1990s. And here's the remarkable part. You don't decide to do it. It just happens. And it creates warmth. Not because you're performing warmth, but because the body creates the feeling by enacting it. You mirror them. They feel understood. You feel connected. Now go one layer deeper. The people who raised you, who shaped you in your earliest years, didn't just teach you words and rules. They installed a template, a kind of unconscious blueprint for what a person feels like. The tone of voice that means safety, the energy that means you can relax, the quality of attention that means you matter. And for the rest of your life, your brain will run pattern matches against that template in every new person you encounter. This is why certain strangers can feel like home within minutes of meeting them. Not because they are safe, but because they match something your nervous system already knows. Psychologist John Bowlby, whose attachment theory has stood as one of the most durable frameworks in developmental science, argued that the attachment patterns formed in childhood don't stay in childhood. They travel, they shape who you trust, who you love, who you instinctively move toward in a room full of strangers. The person who feels like family might actually remind you of someone who was. Sometimes that's beautiful. Sometimes it's a trap. Because the same mechanism that draws you toward warmth and safety can draw you toward familiarity that isn't actually good for you. The critical parent who always felt slightly withheld. The friend who was warm one moment and distant the next. Those patterns are wired too. And your brain might find them familiar, might even find them comfortable, not because they're good, but because they're known. Familiarity and goodness are not the same thing. Your brain doesn't always know the difference. This is why the work of understanding your own patterns, your own nervous system's blueprint, is not just philosophical, it is practical. The strangers who pull you in most powerfully are never neutral. They are telling you something about what your brain has learned to recognize as real, as home, as belonging. And here's what all of this points toward, something that takes a moment to settle. You don't choose who you connect with from a blank slate. You never did. Every person who ever moved you, whoever felt different from the others in a crowded room, arrived not as an accident, but as a match to something already alive inside you, a memory, a pattern, a shape of feeling your nervous system had already been searching for. The stranger who feels like family isn't a coincidence, they're a reflection. And what you see in them, what makes your whole body quiet down and lean in, is something you've been carrying for a very long time. Something that was waiting to recognize itself in another face, across a room full of strangers, in a world that was always stranger than it looked. You walked in not knowing anyone, but part of you was already there.